Now that we've got our project organized, let's shift gears a little bit and start building our detail screen, right? As you see in the design, this is what pops up when we tap on the table view. We see this detail screen. It's kind of like a card with some information about the appetizer. And you know what? It's challenge time again. I encourage you to try to build this on your own. Now, this is probably the most complex piece of UI like we've done yet. So if during that challenge, you struggle, don't worry, it's fine. That's what we're here for. We're here to learn. But if you've been skipping over my challenges so far, I highly encourage you to not on this one, right? Like just watching me type and typing what I type. Yeah, that's cool. But you're really going to learn when you start to push yourself and do this on your own and try and figure it out and use what you've learned to build this. Now, before you do this challenge, a couple things of note, some things that are just different than what we've done before, just to give you a heads up so you're not banging your head too much. As you can see in the design, right, we're not designing a whole screen, we're designing like a little card. So keep that in mind. Also the blurred background over the list, don't worry about that. That's not part of this view. That's part of the list view when we present it. So don't worry about that. And then there's one piece that we haven't touched on yet, and that is the overlay modifier. And that's what we use to build the little circle dismiss X button in the upper right-hand corner. So just a little heads up on that if you do try to build this on your own. Okay, so now's your last chance to pause if you want to try that challenge yourself. Again, I highly encourage it. If not, oh well, we're about to get going in 3, 2, 1. All right, here we go. Looking at the design, let's break this down, right? So we have our overall card, which is our view, right? That's just gonna be a VStack, right? We're gonna give it a background color of .system background so it shows appropriately in light or dark mode. We're gonna give it the rounded corners that you see on the card, and then we're gonna give it a drop shadow. So that's like the basis of our card. It's just our overall VStack. And then the way I like to break this down is I like to break it down into main UI elements. Now, quick disclaimer, the way you do this is kind of subjective. Like there's many different ways to skin a cat, so they say. I don't even know where that came from, but there's a lot of different ways you can lay this out. I'm just gonna show you how I think about it. If you like it, use it. If you don't like it, figure out your own way that's better. Cool. But how I do it is I like to break it down into major chunks of UI, right? So the way I look at this, I look at the image, that's a major component. All this text, like the title, the description, the nutrition information, to me, that's another chunk, that text information chunk. And then the third chunk is the button at the bottom. So I have 3 main UI elements in my VStack. And then of course, the text in the middle, that's broken down into another VStack with my title, my description, and then the H stack, which has a VStack inside it, with the calories and then the number. So that's just how I look at a complex UI like this, is I break it down in maybe chunks is not the, the technical term, but that's what I call it, just the major UI components. And then I break those down even further. So that's how you tackle something like this. So that's the overview. We're gonna be revisiting that design throughout, but let's get started here, right? So in our appetizer list view, our tab, right? I'm gonna do Command N for a new file, Swift UI view. This is going to be our appetizer detail view. Hit create. Cool, here we are. And then the first thing I want to set up before I forget is I know I'm going to need an appetizer on this view. So I can do let appetizer of type appetizer, and then we're good to go. There, we're passing that in. Of course, our preview is going to say, hey, you need an appetizer. And just like before, we did mock data.sample appetizer. And let's actually pull up the canvas for this one because we're going to be building this as we go here. See if previews give us a headache. Get my usual routine there, make it smaller. All right, cool. So the first thing we want to build is our overall VStack. This is the card that we're going to build. So let's get that structure going first. So VStack. Now for right now, let's just put a text in there just to give it something to show. Hello. Just so we can see it on our preview. But now we're going to start adjusting this to make it look like a card. So the first thing I want to do is give it a frame with the width and height. All right, so the width is going to be 320, and then the height 525, and then we don't need an alignment. So you can see the red outline on our preview. That is the general size of our VStack. And I chose 320 by 525 because that's going to be a good size on phones. We're not worried about the iPad right now. This is an app that you're going to use in a bar or a restaurant to order appetizers. So we're just worried about the iPhone for now. So you can see the general structure starting to take shape. The next thing we want to do is give it a background color, but this is going to be color. Now see it's blue just to show you what it is, but we want to do .system background. So again, this is going to be, you're not going to notice it because it's going to be white in light mode, black in dark mode. But again, when it's over the blurred background, like you see in this design, that's how we get this look. So now we want to give it a corner radius of 12, right? To give it that rounded corners. Again, you still can't see it. Now let's make it so you can kind of see it by giving it a drop shadow. We haven't done this yet. Drop shadows in UIKit were always kind of like a pain, but they're pretty easy in SwiftUI. You put the modifier of a shadow and give it a radius of 40. You can add a color, but the default is the black color that we want. So we're not going to mess with like adding a color. But if you did want like a red shadow, you could do that. So let me click on the overall screen to get rid of that red outline. Now you can see the structure of our card. And like I said, because the background color is system background, once we put that drop shadow on it, it really makes it pop. So now let's start filling in our VStack with the 3 major chunks, right? I talked about the image, the information piece, all the text, and then the button at the bottom. And again, this is how I build the UI. I break it down, by components like that. So first thing we have is an image. And then the name we're going to use is our dummy data here, XE assets, the Asian flank steak, copy that, paste it into there, and there you go. Now, as usual with our images, doesn't look right right away. We got to make some adjustments, right? .resizable. Hopefully this is review by now. Okay, so see it resized it to fit. That's not what we want. We want to do aspect ratio content mode .fit. Cool. So now it's going to keep the aspect ratio, but fit it within the VStack. So you see it fit it horizontally. But we want to give it a specific frame here. We'll do frame width was 320 because we want it to fill the whole thing. But the height is 225. And actually I made a mistake. You see it doesn't fill it because I put in the wrong number here for the frame. I wanted to do 300. So now let's go up and change this to 300 like we had. So it fills up the entire width there. Now that's the first major component of this card. The second one is going to be, as you see on the design, that text information. And that's going to be in a VStack overall, right? So I'm going to add my VStack here. And just for now, I'm going to put in a text that just says title. Again, what I'm building right now is kind of just my overall structure of the card. And then I go into each one of these components to flesh it out. So there's my VStack. And then the third component is my button. Again, we'll just print tapped, and then the label for the button, which this is where you design it. Again, we've built a couple buttons by now. Again, for right now, I'm just going to put text button. Again, we're just building out the structure. Now, I don't want my button hugged up against, all my information, right? I want to add a spacer between my title and the button. And remember what the spacer does, it's going to push everything out. So put a spacer under my VStack, because really I want the button to be pushed all the way to the bottom. There you go, which also pushes everything up to the top, which fills in the card on my image nicely. That's what I wanted there. However, my button is hugging the bottom, like literally. I don't want that. So on our button, let's add a padding bottom. So we can do .padding, and then again, we can specify, like we could leave it like that, but we just want to specify the bottom padding. .bottom, and then we're going to give that 30. So now you can see our button is pushed up from the bottom, and we're going to design our button later. But you can start to see the structure of the card, taking shape. So it looks like the image is good. Now let's start working on our text in the middle, right? So this title, we can actually change this to appetizer.name, right? And it should be like test appetizer. That's what our sample is. Now let's start changing the font. So we want font of .title2 and .font weight. .semi-bold. And again, this is just the design I came up with. If you want to tweak this and make it your own, go for it. Now the next piece of text we want to add is our description, right? So we can do text appetizer.description, and then we're going to add a new modifier that we haven't used yet, right? Because take a look at it. It's not centered, it's left aligned. So to do that, you can do .multi-line text alignment. Again, this is a new one. Instead of .leading, that's the default, .center. Right? So now that centers it. And then we want this font to be body, which again, body is usually, anytime you have like a paragraph or a description, you typically want that to be body. And then the last thing we want to add, because it does feel cramped, right? Look at it. I'm going to get rid of that red outline, right? It's all the way to the edges. It's pushed up against the test appetizer. So to fix that, we can just add some default padding around it. There you go. So see, it pushed it down a little bit into the middle, got it away from the edges, made it look a lot easier to read. Okay, so pulling up the design again, the next piece is our nutrition information. Well, you can see that's an H stack of V stacks. So let's build that. So under the text here, do H stack. And then in here, we're going to do our first V stack. And then you'll see we'll just kind of replicate it 3 times. So the first text we want is just a text. And this is calories Now here we're going to change the font size to .font.caption. And again, I just played around with this to get a size and feel that I liked. And I think if we did caption.font.weight.bold, that's the look I liked. And actually, you know what? Let's do something a little quicker rather than spelling out font weight. Remember, we can do this on text, just to point this out for educational purposes. It really doesn't matter, but I just want to point this out. Remember, we can just do .bold on the text. So slightly smaller, but again, educational purposes. So now the next text we want is our actual number. So text, and we want this to be appetizer.calories, right? And that's an int, so we need to do some string interpolation here. I'm doing this string interpolation way backwards, but whatever. There we go. So now you see 99 calories under it. Now we need to format this a little bit. .foreground color. I'll scroll up. Remember, this is .secondary because we want it to be that gray. We want to do .font weight, .semibold, and then .italic. So there you go. You see we get that look, right? The italics 99. Now, in this VStack, right, the calories in the 99 is kind of cramped. So I want this VStack to have some spacing of 5, right? So you see that made it breathe a little bit more. So now what we're going to do is copy this VStack 2 more times, right? Because it's going to be the same format. And we're going to refactor this whole screen in another video. We just want to get it working first. So 1 VStack, 2 VStacks. And now you can see it's not looking exactly like we want, but you can see the structure is there. So let's go up to our H stack. And if we want these to be spaced out a little more, like look at the red box. Like maybe I want that to be wider, you know, they're too close together. So again, we can add some spacing on our H stack, and we're going to, let's try 20. Let's try 40. Now again, just tweak it, dial it in. It's the nice part about these previews. Okay, that's spaced out enough. I feel like it looks symmetrical with the rest of the text in our VStack. So we're gonna go with 40. Now, the only thing we have to change is we don't want calories every time, right? We want carbs, and then make sure there's appetizers.carbs, and then protein, and then appetizers.protein. So there you go. Now we're starting to get this layout looking good. The last thing we need is to style our button. So here in our button label, instead of, well, we'll keep just text for now. We're going to change that in a bit, but I want to get it formatted first. So let's change our font. So we'll do font. It's going to be title 3 and font weight dot semi-bold. And then our frame is going to be 260 by 50. Remember, this is kind of my go-to button size. I feel like it feels like those Apple buttons. We do need to give it a foreground color of white because we want our button title to be white. Well, we just lost it, so let's give it a background color. Background color, so we can see our text here. Color brand primary, right? Remember, we created the extension on the color so we could use it easily. So there you go. There's our button. We are missing our corner radius. So corner radius of 10. Okay, so now looking at our preview, let me click off so I can get rid of that red outline. Cool. You can see our card of our description is coming into shape, right? We have everything we need. Looks good. We're missing 2 things, right? If you look at the design, our button actually shows the price of the item. So we want to incorporate that into our button. And then we're missing the overlay, which is in the upper right-hand corner that has our X button that we use to dismiss the detail view. So let's take care of that. Okay, so back down to our button. The title, again, we don't want it to be button. We want a $, string interpolation here to get our appetizer.price. But if you look at our button, remember, we have to use the specifier to say we only want 2 decimal places. We don't want all those decimal places, unless you do for some reason. Specifier, again, the string is %.2f to give us the 2 decimal places. Cool, so we have the price of our appetizer. Now we can add a dash and say add to order. Right, so now the button says $9.99, add to order on the button. So cool, we've customized our button to show the price, and it's dynamic based on whatever appetizer we have. Okay, so now let's talk about our overlay, and this is new. We haven't talked about this yet. So on our Z stack, right, which has our frame, shadow, corner radius, we're going to add an overlay. So I'm going to start off simple, and then we're going to build up to our button just to explain this. So if you do .overlay, you can see it takes in an overlay content, right? So let's just, for right now, give it a text of, we'll say, test, right? And then you can see or I put text, let's say test, right? So you can see it's right in the middle. It overlays it. It's kind of like a mini Z stack, right? That's how it's treated. It's an overlay on your V stack. So right now it's in the middle. Well, we have an alignment parameter, and you can do, if you hit dot, you can see bottom, bottom leading, top leading. So let's do top trailing because we want it in the upper right-hand corner. So if I do that, now you can see our test got pushed up all the way to the upper right-hand corner. So again, you can overlay text. You can overlay basically any view. So this is going to look ugly before we refactor. This is also a good reason to refactor. But I wanted to show you the two basic elements, right? So you have your view here. Right now we just have our text. For us, it's going to be a button, right? It's going to be our circle with an X in it. And then you have the alignment. Okay. So just keep those two factors in mind. So let's create our view. And our view, again, is just going to be a button, which is the typical button layout here, right? You do the first closure here. And remember, the first part of the button is the action. So for right now, we'll just say print dismiss. And then here at the end of the closure, like I said, this is where it's confusing for right now. Label, and then right the second trailing closure. This is multiple trailing closures. This is why you do that. So again, just the structure here, right? We have our overlay. The item that used to be a text, well, now just the highlighted part is our button, right? Remember the button structure? That just replaced our text. So the highlighted part is item 1, and then the second part is the alignment, right? I know this can look confusing the way we have it right now, but I wanted to highlight that. So now, just like the button up here, right? The label here, we can style however we want, right? Get our button to look what we want it to look like. Well, our button, that's the circle with the X on top, just think about the way I just said that. It's a circle with an X on top. That's the way our button looks like. So that's a Z stack, right? The circle's on the bottom, the X is on the top. So Z stack, and then we have the shape. Remember, we think we did this with a rectangle before in the barcode. Circle, same thing. But that's obviously not what we want it to look like. So let's give it a frame, and we're going to do 30 by 30, because again, it's kind of small in the upper right. There you go. You see how it pushed it into the upper right, and the reason it did that is because our alignment is top trailing. Right, so okay, so it's all the way in the upper right. We still got some work to do. We don't want it to be blue, right? So dot foreground color is dot white, and we want it to be white because even in dark mode, we want it to look the same. And then as a nice little touch, I like to do not just a solid white, just a dot opacity, and we'll say dot 6 for like 60% opacity. Oops, I got to put a 0 in front of that. So 0.6, and again, it's just subtle see-through, right? You can't really tell on the Asian flying steak image, but some of the other images you'll be able to see very subtle, alpha there. And then now we got to put the X on top, and we're going to do the same thing we did in the Frameworks app, where we use the SF symbol for an X, and we're going to give it a frame to give it the bigger touch target, all that stuff. So this is a little bit of review. It's the same exact thing we did there. Really, the only difference is there's a white circle under it for styling purposes. But anyway, image. This is going to be system name because we're using the SF symbol. System name, and this was X mark. Again, same thing we did. Dot frame, we're going to give this 44 by 44. And this is a little trick I did, right? I didn't make the circle 44 by 44 because it looked ridiculous in my opinion. It was too big, too overpowering. However, you can still make your image, right? And you can see the red square around my image, which will also equal my touch target on the button. So that way I allow the user forgiveness on tapping the actual button, but it's kind of like invisible. And then actually on the image, let's do .image scale. And then here's what we can do like medium, .large. Right? If we do .large, that's too big. I don't like the way that looks. Keep an eye on like the upper right as I change this. Let's do .medium. That's okay. I actually think I like the small better. I just like the way that looks, right? Okay, cool. And then the last thing we need to add is the foreground color, because right now it's a blue X. That doesn't go with our motif. So we want to do foreground color dot black, not blue, black. Right, there you go. So that now our X is black, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner. So the styling and layout of our detail view is complete. I'm curious, if you did the challenge, how different was mine? Did you see anything that you disagree with what I did? I'm happy to discuss that in the comments. Did you see anything I did that was like, oh, wow, great idea? Again, I always like comparing and contrasting other people's implementations because like I said, there's many different ways, to put this together. But the last thing I want to mention, because we're gonna keep working on this for 2 more videos, is look, this is This is quite long. And believe it or not, you'll see a lot of Swift UI code like this that's not refactored out. And I just think this is hard to read. So in the next video, we're going to connect the detail view. That way, when you tap on a row in the list view, we'll show this. We're going to get all that connected. And then in the video after that, we're going to refactor it. And that goes back to the lesson of like, get it working first, then refactor, right? That's the thing I want to drill into your head as well. So let's move on to getting all this working.